Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Good to see you back. Today is the first day of summer, December 1 here in Australia. But as you can see, it's windy, gloomy. It was even raining a minute ago. So I don't know what we've got in store. But anyway, today I want to talk about composition using angles and using light to emphasize those angles. So what's that all about? Well, I'm going to show you a heap of images and hopefully we can expand upon this and you'll come away with something that maybe you hadn't heard before. Let's get into it. Any area that is lit in a nightscape image will automatically draw our attention. It will immediately become a point of interest, and I like to use that when I'm shooting at night. Now I want to specifically talk about buildings or maybe cars, subjects like that for a moment. And something I will always try to do is shoot a three-dimensional object from an angle that best displays those dimensions. And as a part of that, I'll try to light the subject in such a way that best emphasizes this. So for me, that means creating highlights and shadows, or I guess light that falls away from one side to the other. And you can see in these images I'm showing you, that is how I have lit that. To get that effect, it has to be thought through from the beginning. Now, if you look for natural light sources, for example, moonlight, you won't get that because it only comes from one angle. Now, if you look at this image, I did light paint it, but it's basically lit from the front, just to the left-hand side a little bit. So it's a lot harder to light in the time that I had available, and that's why I'm using this as an illustration. It's a general interest image because your eye is not really drawn across it because of the light. It's drawn across it simply because of the illustrations and the drawings and so forth, the silo art that is on the building itself. Now, whenever you are photographing circular subjects, you can see here how the light wraps around the round shapes, and I really like that. And so I like to see the curve of the subject really become the emphasis. You can see here the writing that's sort of lit more on one side to the other. And you can even see on this particular image, you can see the shadow on the text because it's bolded. And there's a break in the end of the tank here, which also creates a shadow. And what that does, it draws you through the image. So we start on this side, and the dirt on the earth down the bottom here, it draws you right through into this part of the image. So, of course, I've positioned the tank on that rule of thirds, and I've given it there's plenty of dead space over here. We talked about that in another video. But it's the lighting here that really gives this image its oomph. The same with this one. I've lit this from both sides here. So you can see a highlight down here, and a bit of a highlight down this side as well, and in the middle, shadow. And so that creates mystique and drama, and I really like that because it draws your eye, it makes the image interesting. It makes you start to think about the texture that you can see in this metalwork. And even down here on the bricks, you can see the same thing, where there's highlights and shadowy dark areas, and that emphasizes the shape and the texture of those bricks. Same again, really simple composition. Nothing particularly outstanding about this, but I wanted to make sure that this side of the tank was lit, this side was not so much lit, and that really draws you through. Now, this image is backlit, and because it's an open, the spikes or the tines, if you like, on this hay rake, the light just flows through it, and it makes the wheel glow, which is absolutely fascinating, and I love it. Because you can see through it, you can see the stars behind, but there is absolutely no doubt that the emphasis of this image is on the circular foreground subject. Now this is something that really illustrates my point. Now I've got a gorgeous night sky here, but this shed, which is up, or an old stone cottage I think it is, up on the top of a hill here, I've lit it deliberately quite a lot on this left-hand side and quite a bit on the right-hand back, but in the middle it's dark. That is deliberate. I always try to do that because it makes the image and the building itself really stand out and become a point of interest rather than being overly in your face. Because I've also lit the foreground here deliberately. Again, you can see here it's got highlights on this side, shadows on this side. I guess what I'm trying to do here is zigzag my way through this image, up through this foreground here, into the main part, and then up into the constellation of Orion here, to make the whole image really, really interesting. This one here is a much more complicated image because there's a lot of different parts to this. And what I've done here is I've created lit areas to really draw our attention into this. So this, you can see this shed in the background. I've lit the end of it, but not so much the roof. And the same on this main silo structure here that's lit down the sides, on the top and down the edges. But all around in the middle part, there's a bit more darkness. It's the same on this shed over this side. You can see even on the corrugated iron, because of the light angle, you can definitely see the lines of the corrugated iron. Now, if this was lit front on, same direction as the camera, you wouldn't see that so much, and I don't think it would look as good. Now, the other thing that's in this picture is a car came down the road during the shooting of probably one of the frames. I can't remember how many frames are in this, but you can see there's a car headlight down here, and it's also lit this tree here. Now, I could have got rid of that one there, and maybe, just maybe I should have, in hindsight looking at this, but I don't really think it takes away from this building or this building, so I left it in there. Down here, I left that in there because I really like the fact that it separates the trunk of all these trees. Otherwise, that would be just a black blob. Now, a lot of you would say, well, it might look better as a black blob, and I'm not going to argue because our eye will always see something different depending on who you speak to. But overall, there's a much more complex image, and it's designed, in my mind at least, to make us seek parts of this image to study. And even the railway tracks here, you can see how they're lit with a light on a low angle, really close down to the ground, and that gives you a lot more shape in the tracks. And the shadow down this end, more highlights in the middle, and then it goes back into shadow again down this way. And that is always deliberate. So you can see some more examples of what I'm talking about. This old car, I just love this. I mean, look at the bullet holes in the door. Even grass looks good when it's lit in a manner that highlights sections of the grass and takes away from other sections. And this is my typical fine art light painting methodology. The background hill and everything, you can just slightly make out what it is, but it's not lit by me at all because I want the eye to be definitely drawn into this main subject. And of course, the Milky Way in the background there. Love this one because this really does illustrate my point. All of the background down the bottom here is not lit. You can't, it's just black nothingness. And that is deliberate because I want this old bus, which I light painted a lot. I put lights inside the engine compartment, lights inside the bus itself, and then lit from the outside. But I deliberately left some dark edges and parts of the foreground dark so that our eye has to look through this image and take it all in. Even these headlights, you can see there are highlights around the edges, but it's dark behind because I haven't lit that back section. Now, if I had lit this from the angle of the camera, then you wouldn't see that so much. Now, I've still used the standard compositional tools. So because the Milky Way here arches over the top, it's a very symmetrical looking arch. I deliberately placed the bus in the center of the frame because I think it matches the sky. And we talked about that in one of our previous videos, how we can have a top part of an image as a point of interest and the bottom part as a point of interest. But I'm using the light to really draw our eye through this foreground. And I do that nearly all the time with my Nightscape photography. Backlighting is something that portrait photographers have used forever. And to be honest, so have landscape photographers. In sunrise, you will often get backlit images. But what I've done here, I've placed a flash on the railway tracks facing back towards the camera to give that deliberate backlighting. So the lighting has been placed there to deliberately emphasize the four people in the middle of the frame. Once again, this is framed up as a central composition, and you can see there's a dark sort of outline of the silos in the background. They are important, I guess, in one way to help set the scene of this, but they're not the main point of interest because I want the main point of interest to be the people. But you know what else is a point of interest in this image? It is the color. So we've got blue here, which is the flash itself. Now it's blue because I changed the white balance in camera. But that contrasts beautifully with the yellow or orange street light out here. Now, normally I don't take pictures pointing directly into street lights like that, but because it was so bright and there was a lot of fog around, I thought that's going to glow beautifully, and it did. So this is shot nice low angle, really low down, 14mm focal length, and you can see that the people are the point of interest, but there's so much more than just that. It's all about the lighting and the colour. This one's a little bit the same, lots of fog, people shining torches into the air. There's a backlight, so I placed a flash back there. Now the backlight is important here because what it's doing is giving emphasis to the glow of the fog. The torch beams obviously are doing the same thing, and there's actually a bit of Milky Way up here. It's very hard to see because it was hidden by the fog, but the direction of the lighting, the backlighting, is the main key element of this shot. Same here. There's only backlighting. Got a nice Milky Way, you've got two people standing there, there's a flash on the ground, it is lighting a bit of grass, and there's a light on the shed here. So it's all about backlighting. Now, speaking of backlighting, I want to talk about natural light. I want to talk about light pollution as well. Yes, I am going to talk about light pollution and using natural light or light pollution to strengthen a composition. And it's mainly due to the backlighting element. So you can see this first one here. This is an aurora, and it's just a single shot. Now, the gorgeous orange, red sky in the background highlights the foreground. I put a little bit of light on the front of it just so we could actually see what it is. And I love the tire marks in the ground here. Now, this is a single exposure. Nothing complicated about this whatsoever. But I did throw a little bit of light in the front here just to highlight the front. But the backlight is what makes this image really stand out. And the vibrant colour, once again, colour is adding to my composition. And this was the same night, actually, a massive aurora, Mother's Day 2024. Now, the pink sky reflecting in the water of the dam there is obviously beautiful. The composition, though, is still symmetrical. You can see the dam, it's basically complete in the image here, and I made sure of that. And the windmill, which is on the other side of the dam, well, it's reflected in the water there. So there's a fair bit going on in this image. Obviously, it's all about the aurora that was happening on that particular night. This is a panorama image, I think about 7 images sideways. I think it's from memory, a 16mm Viltrox f1.8 lens. So once again, I'm using backlighting and colour to really emphasise my point here. Now, this image was taken pre-dawn. It's still dark enough to see the Milky Way galactic core there, but there's also a lot of light on the horizon. It's natural light. You can also see, I think that's Venus down here, the planet. A couple of satellites or whatever in the sky there. But I increased the shadow detail in the photograph to get this front of the silo to show, because there's no light painting or anything on that. But I just want to emphasize the point. I'm using natural light, basically the same as any landscape photographer would do at sunrise. Now, this is zodiacal light. This is a natural light, comes around about different times of the year. This is October. Milky Way galactic core setting in the western sky of this windmill, and this gorgeous glow that just really hits you in the face when you see it. You can see it with your natural eye, but when the camera does a long exposure, it really stands out and it just looks absolutely wonderful. This image, a panorama I took just a couple of months ago, same thing. Zodiacal light here, Milky Way arch across there, great little meteor in the middle of the frame, love that. So once again, I'm using a fairly symmetrical composition. So it's a panorama, and I've showed you compositions like this in the past. Now, this track that you can see here is actually the same flat, straight track that I'm placing my tripod on. But because it's a panorama, it looks like it's 2 separate roads. But I've made sure that I included the whole circle of the water and as much of the circle of the Milky Way. It's not totally symmetrical because the Milky Way was off to one side a little bit, but to help balance that a little bit, I made sure I included the large and small Magellanic Clouds over here. So all of these things are deliberate actions. I'm not just pointing my camera up into the sky and saying, oh, well, I'll point it in that rough general direction and see what we can come up with. No, what I'm looking for are elements. Now, the actual detail in the water here, and the landscape. If I zoom in, you can see there's other things over there, but that's not what I'm trying to highlight. By the way, there is no moonlight, there is no light painting, there's nothing. I just increased shadow detail in post-production to get this out. This is just, I think they were 15-second shutter speeds. It's a panorama. Now, I talked about it before, the dreaded light pollution. I use light pollution all the time to emphasize foreground subjects. And you can see here, there's light pollution coming from a distant town down there. Now, I must emphasize straight up front here, I'm not talking about massive nuclear light pollution. I'm talking about a town that's off in the distance that's not going to kill the whole sky. Now, a lot of you listening to this video are going to say, well, everywhere I go to has massive light pollution. Well, I am blessed. I live in Australia. We do not have massive light pollution issues here. All you need to do is get away from the big cities and you will be in good skies. But I'd still like to use a little bit sometimes. Now, to give you an idea of how I took this, I actually put a flash on a light stand down here to give these shadows. I was trying to create some sort of scene. Years and years ago, I took this image just to highlight and give a bit of rim light around the person standing there. But it would still stand out without that because the light pollution is there. Once again, just a tree standing in a paddock, a Milky Way there, but there's light pollution right behind the tree. And I often try to place my foreground subjects in a way that the light pollution backlights that particular subject. And, you know, like I've said in previous videos, sometimes it's hard to make the subject that you want to take a photo of fit the scene exactly where you want it to. And there's various elements I'm trying to juggle around here, but that's what I'll often try and do. I've showed you this image in the past. That's actually an old church building and a really cold, misty, foggy night, and a truck was coming down the highway. So, well, a truck is light pollution, isn't it? So I used that to backlight the old church, and I think that one came out really good too. This is a simple image and I absolutely love it, but I haven't added any light whatsoever. It is all light pollution. Now, once again, it's about a Bortle 3 sky, I would say, and it's also a panorama. I think there's about 6 or 7 shots which I've blended here. All of the light is coming from this glow in the sky down here to the south of the subject, and you can see the highlights on all these posts. So what I've done is some careful editing just to make sure that I can see enough of the wood here, the fence and the track, to make the image interesting. Now, you would definitely call this a leading line because this fence is leading us into this part of the image. Now, it's interesting because the fence is leading us into the light pollution, and also if you follow the Milky Way here, you can see it's also leading us into the light pollution, or you could say it's coming out of the light pollution. Doesn't really matter because our eye is actually being drawn through the image, and that's what I'm always trying to portray. So this is moonlight, good old moonlight. Moonlight is a natural light source, but I have to tell you, be very careful when you're shooting nightscape images in moonlight because its light is often very harsh and it's certainly not controllable. Moonlight will actually illuminate everything, even things you may not want to be highlighted. But in this case, I love it because it's backlit these clouds. Now, I can't possibly do that with any other methodology. This is backlit by clouds, but the clouds are so thin, you can still see the stars through them, and that looks great. This is a shot I rarely ever take, but it's pointing my camera directly into a crescent moon. Now, it's not a full moon, it's only a thin crescent, but it blows out. As soon as you put your camera anywhere near a moon, it will blow out. And you can see this time lapse. That's a crescent moon, and it illustrates the way that moon is lighting the landscape. Now, in this case, it's good. I don't think it's overlighting it too badly because it's only a thin crescent. You can see the light pollution appear there on the left-hand side. Now, here's another time lapse showing moonlight on this little pot of flowers. Now, I've deliberately focused on the flowers, and all the stars and the clouds and everything in the background are out of focus, and that's deliberate. Once again, using focus to hone in my composition on the foreground. Now, it was a bit windy, but it still looks great. I love the bugs floating all over the place. You can see because the moon's moving through the sky, the pot there comes into shadow by the time we get to the end of it. So these are things to consider when you're doing time lapse with moon, because you'll find shadows going across. As I said to you before, moonlight lights everything. You can see in the background, this tree's lit. This shed over here has got lights all over it. This tree here is lit. Now, if I was taking a still image of this, I probably wouldn't want to light some of this stuff. But with a moon, you get what you get. So, getting back to where we started. Create angles to emphasize light whenever possible. Try not to add harsh light to the front of our subject. Rather, add light to the sides and the edges of our subject. Use light to give special weight to important elements in our scene. So when we're composing an image, we are making sure that the eye is always going to be drawn towards whatever it is that we want people to look at, and incorporate backlighting whenever possible. And as you can see, backlighting is something that operates in the natural world, and we need to make good use of it. Well, I hope you were able to get something out of that. And as you know, I love to use light in my nightscape photography, and perhaps now you can see why I like to do that. All right, look forward to reading your comments, and we'll have a look at something else in our next video, which will probably be next week. So look forward to seeing you then. Have a great week.